ARE Podcast, episode number 10.
Welcome to the ARE Podcast. Where it's all about encouraging and inspiring you today so you can fulfill your dream of becoming a licensed architect tomorrow. And now your host. He lives in the most pedestrian-friendly city in the world, Los Angeles, David Doucette.
Hello. Welcome back to another action-packed and exciting episode of the ARE Podcast here. We have a very special guest today. I'm excited to talk with this person. And no, Eric, it is not you, but Eric Corey Freed, of course, is joining us. Mark R. LePage, the Entree Architect, is joining us. So, Mark, we're really excited to have you on today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. This is great.
I'll give you a brief introduction, Mark, and then we'll get going here. So you are a licensed architect in New York, and you're a partner at 5Cat Studio Architecture, which is a high-end residential firm in Westchester County of New York. You're also an entrepreneur and founder of Entree Architect, and you can find more at entrearchitect.com, and you host the Entrepreneur Architect podcast. And your mission is to teach sole proprietors, small firm architects, and students the importance of business success in the field of architecture. And we can follow Mark on Twitter at Entree Architect. So really excited to talk to you today because it's a cool business model you have going on. You're embracing social media. You've launched the podcast. So a lot to talk about. But before we do all that stuff,
Sure.
let's we're all going to go back here a little bit with your ARE story. We're all about the same age here. So when did you first take the ARE?
Sure. I took the ARE in the late 90s.
Okay. And how long did it take you to get through that process?
It took about a year.
Oh, okay.
Once I committed to it, because it took me a long time to actually, get myself into gear and actually pull the trigger on it.
Right.
Once I planned it, it took about a year to get through it.
And that was just because I think it was right around 98 is when they transitioned out of the old format into, and so you jumped right into the multiple choice format.
Yeah, I was the first the first round of the new digital format.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember at 98.
The guinea pigs, that's what he was.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
I took programming, not really studying for it because I thought, I've been practicing architecture and I'm in, graduate architecture school. I don't need to study for programming. I took programming and I failed it and it took the wind out of my sails and I didn't take another one for a couple of years. So I'm glad you hung in there.
That's what happens, yeah.
All right. So knowing what you know now, obviously the exams are a little different, but would you have done anything different in sort of your preparation of the AREs?
I don't think so. Looking back at it, I don't think so. At the time, I was frustrated that I hadn't taken it yet. It took me. I graduated in '93, and I didn't take the exam until probably '99 or so.
Okay.
I actually launched 5Cat as Anne Marie McCarthy Architect. Anne Marie McCarthy is my wife, and we launched the firm while she was still working with another firm. And we sort of launched it as a side business. I was working solo already with a company that I created called the Construction Documents Company, which was a consulting firm for our architects who did existing conditions drawings and construction documents for them. And that sort of was a transition business that I created between launching 5Cat and leaving the firm that I was with. Go ahead.
So you put off taking the exams for a while, so then obviously it hung on your head, as it does all of us when we finish architecture school or we finally get ready or authorization to test and then we don't test. I mean, it weighs on us, right? You felt the same thing.
Exactly. I think although you hear the horror stories of the previous format where, hundreds of architects, or aspiring architects would all, ascend on the one building that was available for that one period of time when they all went in there with their drafting boards and they spent the entire 2 days of taking the entire exam. As horrible as that sounds, I think those architects had the benefit of knowing that it was only going to be taken, being able to be taken once per year. So if you missed it, you missed it. And so you were forced to focus on it. Whereas now that it's all digital and you take it whenever you want to, the procrastination sets in, and people tend to push it off and push it off and push it off until it becomes a crisis and they need it, and then they focus on it.
Yeah, it is. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
That's why NCARB had to institute the rolling clock, because they found that their numbers were dropping precipitously.
Yeah, I guess the rolling clock to encourage people once they started to stay in it. And I guess the biggest piece of advice I can give, because I see this working with people who are preparing for the California supplemental exam as well, is just when you're ready, when you get your authorization to test, just take it, because it gets harder. As we all know here, it gets harder the longer you wait. I mean, you get into relationships, you get married, you get kids, and then it's really hard.
Right. The way I would recommend any student is, just like you planned to become an architect and you focused on getting into architecture school, and then you focused on graduating architecture school. Make that next step, getting your IDP done, and then as soon as your IDP is done, then take the exam immediately, and make it that next step. Don't say, oh, I can take it whenever, and my next step is to get a job and start being an architect, and whenever I need the license, I'll get it, because you'll never get it, or you'll wait until you need it, and then it'll take you a year to get it. And so if you kind of focus on it as if it's the next step, then you'll get it, and then you'll have it when you need it.
Yeah, it's almost like just focusing on it, almost like another sort of business, or setting goals, or, and I know you talk about that too, and we talk about that here, but just taking it seriously, setting the goals, treating it as sort of, I guess, a business in the sense of, being serious about it, writing your plan down, and just executing it.
Yeah, and ultimately that's what you're in it for. I mean, when you decided to become an architect 10 years prior, or more for many of us, that's the ultimate goal. And so to not set the time apart to actually take the exam is, you're not really reaching your goal. Even if you're working in a firm doing what an architect does, it'll always weigh on you that you haven't actually taken the exam and you're not actually technically an architect.
Yeah, and I think even if, because I know some people get out of architecture school and they get through IDP and they just sort of lose, I guess, the interest in it. But again, I would just say take the exam anyway, because down the road you have it if you need it. And many people go through career changes, and many people change careers by the time they hit 40. So if you're in your late 20s, you might think, well, I don't want to do it, but just do it. You did the hard part. You already did architecture school. Just do it, because if you don't want to use it come 40, you might want to use it.
Right. And looking back on it, I mean, it was hard going through it, but it's not that hard. I mean, if you focus on each piece and study the way you need to study, and take the prep courses that you need to take, it's not that hard to pass it.
And Eric, let's bring you in here, because we like your charming face and your personality and everything that goes along with it, even though you're wearing the same color shirt I am. So
I want people to think that I'm you.
That's not going to happen. I'm sorry. So, and you did the AIAS in like 16 weeks or something crazy like that, right?
I booked them 2 weeks apart.
Were you late 90s too, or were you early 2000?
My timing is the same as Mark's. I graduated in 94, and I took them in 97, 96, 97. It was the first guinea pig class of doing it on the computer. So I think that was 97. And but I booked them all 2 weeks apart, and just took them. And the ones that I was intimidated by, I did up front, because that way, if I failed them, I could, the 6 months would pass quicker, and I could take them again. But luckily, I got through them on the first try. And I'm not saying that in a bragging way. I'm saying that because I didn't have a life for 18 weeks. That's all I did was that, and had no fun. And it got into a rhythm too, which was, I ended up getting the results about 10 days after the test, but 4 days before I was about to take the next one, and that kept boosting my confidence, and I kept kind of checking them off. So that was the way to do it. I mean, it was awful, but it was the way to do it.
Yeah, you just have to suck it up. I mean, look, I took 7 years to do it, which you can't even do now with a rolling clock. But yeah. All right. So in both of you, both Mark and Eric, you guys are entrepreneur architects. So Mark, tell me, you created 5Cat Studio. What was the reason, or what was the drive that you wanted to go out on your own?
It was always the plan. I was born an entrepreneur. So my father is an auto mechanic. I grew up in his shop watching him run his business and restoring Corvette cars on the side and flipping them. And so, it's sort of in my blood to be an entrepreneur. And so that was always the plan. So my goal was to go through architecture school, get through my internship, and launch a firm as soon as I can. And that's what I did. And I was 29 when I launched 5Cat with Anne-Marie. And so it was never really a question in my mind.
That's interesting. So you never overcome, let's talk, for example, about fear, because I think a lot of us architects and architects to be love the idea of going on our own and love that sort of, man, it'd be great to be our own boss and do what we love. But the reality is many of us don't do it because of the fears and all the other stuff that could happen, because it's scary.
Yeah.
Did you have any of that? Because obviously this is something over the years that you were just going to do no matter what. And I sort of personally felt the same way with me. So I didn't focus too much on the fear. It's there. But did you have any of those fears when you initially launched?
Not really. I mean, when I initially launched, everybody sort of has questions. I never really had any fears. I think I was really too young and stupid to really know what I was getting myself into. And business was 100 times harder than I ever imagined it would be. But I never really had the fears. You have the fears that the biggest fear I had was that I did get into. I worked in 3 separate firms, and intentionally I focused on working in a small firm that did mostly residential work. Then I moved to a very big firm, URS, which was Grenier, and now it's called URS Corp, which is one of the biggest engineering architecture firms in the world. And then I went to a mid-sized firm that did K-12 school work, and became a project manager there. And in that, I got to the point in that firm where I needed to make the decision of whether I was going to leave and start my own firm or stay there and become a partner, because they were starting to plan for me to be part of their firm and started grooming me for partnership. And I needed to make that decision. And really, it never was a decision in my mind. And that was one of my biggest fears, is having that conversation with those partners, letting them know that I wasn't going to stay with them. And the disappointment that they would feel when I left was probably my biggest fear at the time.
Right.
I probably should have had more fears. But at the time, I was 29 years old. We had very few expenses. Anne-Marie was still working full-time with another firm. I had this other side business. And so we just jumped. We jumped in with no money and no clients and just did it.
So you were married at that time?
We were, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm just thinking of this right now. When we're talking about you being the entree architect, your specialty now is residential architecture, as is Eric's, as is mine. So I guess let me ask you, Mark, what is it about when we're talking about this idea of the entrepreneur architect? What is it about that it makes us attracted to residential opposed to, let's say we're going to run a big firm and have 60 people and have big jobs? Is that still an entrepreneur architect?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're running a business and you're launching it, and probably even if you haven't started the firm, even if you're with the practice, say I stayed with that other firm and grew into partnership, I think entrepreneurism is a way of life and a way of thought. Focusing on the business and the success of business and the game of business, that's what makes you an entrepreneur. So, in my opinion, every architect who's running a business is an entrepreneur architect. I think they just don't realize it, and that's sort of my mission, is to make them realize it.
Yeah, and And when you were in your sort of 20s getting this different work experience, because as we know, residential is a completely different skill set than anything commercial related. Did you have the idea that, hey, I'm going to go out on my own and I want to do commercial stuff, or you had the idea, you know what, residential is what I want to do on my own?
Residential was always the focus for us. When we first launched the firm, we took anything we could get. And we really launched the firm doing small commercial work. We did restaurants and boutique retail for most of the first couple of years. That's because that's what came to us. We had the opportunity through friends, to design a restaurant. And that restaurant led to another restaurant and led to another restaurant, and then a couple of salons and some retail spaces. But our interest is houses. We just love houses. As personally, as architects, we have a passion for residential design and residential architecture. And so, as the business grew and sort of gained a foothold, we decided to shift exclusively to residential. And that was really through a process of learning about business and what I needed to know to run a business. And to focus a market on a specific target market. And when we decided we were going to shift, to kind of take anything any way we could, we shifted to a target market of residential architecture. Basically, large renovations and additions is our target, with budgets that are ranging between $300,000 and $700,000. That's really the target client that we're looking for, which during the recession became difficult to find. And so we did sort of let that target grow a little bit.
Right.
But that was where we dedicated ourselves to residential architecture and actually turned away commercial work in order to really build a brand on becoming a residential architect.
And Eric, how because you've been doing this a long time as the organic architect, you've had your residential practice for a number of years. How old were you when you went on your own?
I went on my own in '97, so I was 27 years old, and didn't know what I didn't know. I think that was the best part. But at that point, I had already worked for several people that were running the type of firm that I wanted to run, which was what I call a sole proprietor visionary type practice. But what I didn't realize was that I didn't know anything about finding clients. Everybody I'd worked for, they always just kind of showed up, and I had to learn very quickly about networking and marketing and publicity and PR and all that stuff. And I found that I had a knack for it, luckily. But if I didn't, I could see why a lot of people get into it and then not like it. And then, because I think the image is that you're just going to be surrounded by crumpled up tracing paper, right? And the clients will just come in, and then that's all it'll be. And in truth, that's only a small little percentage of what we actually get to do.
Well, it's interesting too, because I tell candidates, for the CSE, in California, they need to pass the California supplemental exam before they get their architecture license to practice in the state. And, I tell them, I break the news to them that, once they pass the exam and they get their license, really nothing changes. It's not like the riches start falling from the sky. It's not like clients start banging down the door. We like to think that's the way it is, but the reality is it's just the beginning, because then we have to now, if we're choosing to go out on our own, we have to do all that.
Well, think about it. And you always see a press release if a member of the firm becomes an AIA fellow or a lead fellow, or even if they just get their lead AP credential. You always see some press release go out from the firm. I never see a press release go out when they go, 27-year-old Joe Johnson just finally passed his architecture exam. They never announce that. Right? And it's not newsworthy, I think. I mean, it should be, but it's not. And I think that's part of it. Is I think you're right. People are waiting for something to happen as soon as they get that letter in the mail, and it doesn't. Which by the way is probably another good episode, or at the very least a reason to go to Mark's site, because you can make a plan for, okay, once I pass the test, now what do I do?
Well, I'm glad you just mentioned that, and definitely go to Mark's site, entrearchitect.com, because I've been on my own since I I was 32 when I launched my own, 31 or 32 when I launched my own residential practice. But I have to tell you, I had, decent cash flow over the years. At the end of at the end of the day, it was difficult to realize the profit per se certain years. But I will say, I don't think I ever really started thinking of myself as an entrepreneur till maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. Meaning, I didn't think about it from, I guess, the real business angle that I think we need to think about it. Like Mark, I always wanted to just sort of, I guess, be an architect and be on my own. Like, I knew that was going to happen, but I didn't know sort of the business side of it, or sort of even the entrepreneur side, or even a few years ago, I never felt like I could really call myself an entrepreneur. Like, I thought that was for entrepreneur, businessy type people, but that's what we are. So.
Right.
My question to you, Mark, is why isn't business more a focus in architecture school?
I don't know. I wish it was.
Right.
The more I do what I do, the more I learn, and they really, the schools really look at it as not their responsibility. Their responsibility as architecture professors and architecture programs is to teach architects to become architects, to think architecturally, and to do the things that they teach us. I believe that there should be a business program as part of architectural education, as part of their standard education. Their argument to me when I bring that up to professors and people who run the programs is that they don't have the time to do that they don't have even enough time to do what they're doing. They don't have time for that. And they see that as a responsibility of the IDP process, and that the IDP process should be teaching young architects to be architects, to teach them what they need to know in order to become a practicing architect. But they don't get it there either, because so many architects are so closed that, and private with what they do from a business point of view, they're not getting it there as well, which is why I launched Entrepreneur Architect, or relaunched it in 2012. I started Entrepreneur Architect in 2007, but I relaunched it as a resource for architects to learn about business in 2012, with the mission to encourage architects to be more transparent and to be more collaborative and to share what you know so others can learn from you. I don't know everything I need to know, and so my goal is to put everything I know out there. Put it out there on the blog, put it all out there on the podcast, teach everybody everything I know. And then that hopefully will encourage others to do the same, and we'll all learn from one another. And I hope as we grow, Entrepreneur Architect will become that piece that architects go to when they leave architecture school and they go through the IDP process, because they're not going to get it there. I don't believe they'll ever get it there. There needs to be something that architects can go to get what they need to know to launch the firm. Because like Eric said before, you don't know what you don't know until you're in it. And if I could put it out there, for one, I could prepare people to know what you need to know, and actually give them the information they need in order to successfully launch a firm and run it sustainably.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about the business side of this, nothing is complex here. We're not trying to become economists or anything like that. I think a lot of what we're talking about is just the basic understanding of running a business, profit and loss, balance sheet. How do we interact with clients? How do we interact with potential clients? How do we, what do we do on that first meeting in terms of discussing budget? Like, just basic stuff that we just don't know. Exactly
right. I mean, last year, when I launched the firm, when I relaunched Entrepreneur Architect, I launched it as, I called it my 12-12-12 project. It was December 12th, 2012. I announced to the world that I was going to relaunch the blog and launch the podcast. And that first 15 weeks of January of 2013, I wrote, or had guest bloggers write, 12 steps to a successful business in architecture. And those 12 steps are the fundamentals of business. Those are the minimum of what we need to know to launch and run an architecture firm. That's still on my blog for free. You can go to entrearchitect.com/academy, and on that page there's a link to our resource guide, and the resource guide is those 12 blog posts. That if you read those 12 blog posts and you followed the basics of what's being taught there, you'll know the basics of what you need to know about running an architecture firm.
Eric, when did you sort of realize you were an entrepreneur? Because I think this it's a mindset, and I think it's important because looking back when I didn't, the years that I was running my business but not thinking of myself as an entrepreneur, I think it hurt me a little bit. Like I would have been further along if I just accepted that I was an entrepreneur earlier on.
I had set some early goals for myself when I launched the firm. The first goal was that I wanted to make the same amount that I gave up when I quit my job. That was I think that's most people's first goal. And then when I did that, then I had another goal of, I wanted to have clients come in without me knowing where they came from. That to me, that was a signifier of some sort of success, that they came in because of word of mouth rather than some direct line of marketing or introduction that I'd made. And so I started setting these little mini goals for myself. And then once I started to achieve a lot of them, I realized I still wasn't getting the momentum I wanted. I wasn't feeling as satisfied as I wanted. I wanted to reach more people more quickly. And that started around 99, so 2 years after I started the firm, and really kicked into full gear in 2001. And that was the year that I consciously said, okay, I feel like I have, the firm stuff handled. It's moving along. I've built up this thing. It's moving along. And now I want to get to the point where I can reach out to do other things. So in 2001 is when I consciously said, I'm going to start speaking, writing, teaching, consulting, and see where it takes me. And the idea was that initially that's not going to make me money, but it'll be marketing. So that's how I justified it in my head. But in truth, that ended up becoming the bigger money maker than than architecture did.
Right. That's
how it began. It just started with this quest to reach more people.
And I think what's important there, and I guess what I'm hearing from both of you is it's an interesting profession, and we might sort of lay it all out in front of us or have our 5-year or 10-year plan. And having a plan is important, but the plan, may change. Obviously, I think Mark, Entre Architect, is becoming more popular. You are now speaking on behalf of sort of Entre Architect. Were you just in Chicago in December?
I was, yeah. I spoke at the AIAS forum, the National Convention for Architecture Students.
And how did I assume they found you through the website. Did they reach out to you to invite you, or did you have to contact them?
They did. They invited me. The organizers, the students who, the local chapter, the Illinois Institute of Technology was the local chapter that ran the convention this year, and they reached out to me to speak and brought me into the national organization.
And did you like doing that? Like, did you feel you're doing something more than 5-Cat studio architecture?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was part of the long-term goal, was to speak. Part of what I want to do is to I want to grow Entrepreneur Architect as big as I can make it. I want it to be the resource where architects go. So that's all part of the plan, was to write the blog, do the podcast, do the newsletter, a weekly newsletter, then begin to public speak, write books, do everything that I need to do in order to publicize what I'm doing and encourage others to do it as well. The public speaking came sooner than I expected. I spoke at a small at AIA convention as well in Denver, on a small stage at it's the Architect Live stage that was in the expo area. I spoke there as well.
Oh, cool. And you like the speaking part?
I do. It's hard. It's sort of nerve-wracking to get up in front of 1,000 students and say what you have to say. But what was cool is that my message really resonates with young architects and students, because they clearly recognize that the profession has some issues and some problems, and they're all afraid. And so when somebody stands up and says, here's the way we can fix this, they all listen, and they really, really received what I said very well. They got excited about it. So,
and I think what's cool, there's a lot of opportunity for young architects. There's a lot of different avenues they can go. So I think it's an exciting time. It's a difficult time coming out of architecture school. I mean, the economy is on the upswing. Work is picking up, but it's tough, and I can imagine it's tough when somebody's not telling them or explaining to them sort of the business side of things. But then, for example, in Chicago, you're able to shed light on that. So yeah, I imagine they were all probably nobody was sleeping through your talk.
No, I don't think so.
Let's talk about the Architects Manifesto. What is that?
The Entrepreneur Architect Manifesto is basically it's 11 points of action that I believe architects need to make change in the profession. There are pieces of the profession that need to be addressed, and a little bit about how I think things need to be addressed. It's not very in depth. It's sort of a growing document that's evolving, but it was my way of getting out the things that I believe are issues with the profession, and things that we need to really focus on as architects.
What's the first one that comes to your mind, or what's the biggest issue?
The biggest issue I feel from a business point of view is profit then art. I believe that every architect really should be focusing more on building a strong business that's profitable before focusing on going out and changing the world through their architecture. I believe that should happen, but I believe that most architects have have it flipped, where they launch a firm and all they want to do is get out there and create this amazing architecture, and they let the business fall apart. And my argument is that if you have a strong business, then you can create as much architecture as you want, because the business will sustain itself, and you can go out and do all the things that you ever dreamed of doing.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point. And I mean, what it really is it's building the foundation. I mean, we might as well use a pun here, but that's really what it is. And I remember my biggest piece of advice that I tell people now is it's not about how much money you're making. It's about how much money you're spending. It's all your expenses. And when I first launched, I got an office that was bigger than I needed. I got 3 phone lines because 3 phone lines sounded cool, So I just had a bunch of expenses right from the get-go. And, you have your profit, you have your income, but if you're spending more than you're taking in, it doesn't matter if you're, making $100,000 a month. If you're pulling out $150,000 a month, you're still losing. Those are not my numbers, by the way. That was off the top of my head. But but I think just the expenses are sort of the biggest thing, and that's what nobody thinks about, Yeah.
I did the same thing. We launched we launched in '99. We stayed in the house for 3 years, and moved to an office with just Anne-Marie and me. And actually, Anne-Marie has had a home office all along, so it was me moving into a new office, which was about 10 minutes away from our house. And we looked for about 1,000 square feet. We were offered 2,000 square feet at an incredible deal, and took 2,000 square feet with just me. and thinking, young architects again, thinking I was going to fill it immediately. Totally. And it sat there empty for almost 2 years. Paying rent on it with me in this small little corner office with the door closed with an electric heater with the heat turned off in order to not have to pay for the heat. And slowly we grew into it, and we absolutely filled it at one time. And then through the economy, people left and moved on, and now we're back down to just 3 of us. And in November, we decided our lease came due, and we decided to actually change our business model and move from the big expensive office into a home office, and the staff became remote. And so the one architect that works with us became an independent contractor, has his own studio. We work remotely and meet once a week in person. And as we grow again, which we're in the process of doing, those people will also be independent contractors building, working remotely.
Yeah, I think that is the big. I can totally relate to the 2,000 square feet. Although I got 560 square feet when I first started, but it was like you're sitting in there and you're like, why do I have all this space? But you felt good. You felt like, hey, I'm doing it. Look at the space. I'm going to fill it up.
It's the beginning of the rest of my life, right?
But yeah, I think we haven't talked about this yet. But the technological advances that have happened over the last few years that has really revolutionized how, solopreneur architects or architects with a small staff can really function and really keep their expenses down. As you wrote about in November, you gave up that big space. You're still able to do exactly what you're able to do before.
Right.
And now you don't have the big expense. So that's more money that you get to keep, in your pocket.
Right. It's that's a huge advantage. There are some growing pains, kind of relearning how to stay on top of projects, when they're not right in front of you, where you can kind of walk around the studio and check everybody's projects. You sort of have to rebuild that digitally with, we're creating an Evernote process, and we're creating a Dropbox process where that can still happen, but it'll all happen digitally. And so there's lots of that sort of setting that up and learning how to use that effectively so you're not missing things. Those are probably the big pain points of doing what we're doing.
Which I'm glad you mentioned that for two reasons, because part of what I think, we're doing, both Eric and I here, I guess, and certainly you, but like how we're thinking of stuff, how we are thinking of being architects differently, how we are embracing technology. Because I think traditionally architects are not the most technologically savvy people. And I think that needs to change if we want to really make a difference in the profession. And there's certainly those of us that are. But to your point, using Evernote and Dropbox, if somebody if somebody wants to go out on their own without having to get an office, if they can set up Evernote and Dropbox and basically set up a system, they can run a virtual office and, like you mentioned, hire maybe an independent contractor or two when they get busy enough. But first off, they'll just do the working drawings themselves. But the point is just using technology, finding a system that allows you to do what you need to do. And Evernote and Dropbox, I mean, that you can run an office with those.
Right. And residential, going back to, another benefit of residential architecture is that all our meetings are at the residence, at the homes of the people we work in. We do additions and renovations. So there is already a place to meet. And so I don't even need to have clients come to this studio. When you're doing commercial work, you really need a place to have those meetings. So that's another piece that you'd have to set up. You'd have to have some sort of meeting place where you can have clients come. But that too can be done on a temporary basis where you're working in those staff offices.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. Clients, if we're talking residentially, clients will never come to your office. I don't feel like you need an office for that, because that was one of my things of clients are going to come here. I got this really cool retro $800 desk that's going to for the conference. It's going to be fantastic. And a few came, but the reality is nobody needs to come. You could just go to their house, or worst case scenario, you can meet at a Starbucks. But I never even did that. It's always at the house. That's,
they don't want to come. They want you to come to them.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So then, Mark, you said you were 29 when you went on your own. Eric, you were how old? 27. I was, I think I was 31 or 32. And I think we can all admit that, like Eric said, we didn't know what we didn't know. What would you recommend, Mark, for sort of intern architects, in terms of getting, I guess, the most out of their internship? Focusing on, they might want to, actually forget what they want to do after their internship, but how do they get the most out of their internship?
Yeah, I would recommend doing exactly what I did, is whether you're planning on launching your own firm or not, sort of be diverse in your experiences. I worked in 3 different firms, 3 different types of architecture, 3 different sizes, all very intentionally to plan for the future. The first firm I took, the first firm coming out of architecture school, I took whatever I could get. It wouldn't have mattered whether it was a small firm or a large firm. I came out in 1993, into a very similar situation that we have today, where we're coming off a recession and no one was hiring. And so I can relate very, very well to the people who are coming out of school now. But that was a small firm doing residential architecture, some commercial work, but pretty much residential. Then intentionally, I left there and took the firm in the very large firm in order to gain that experience, and then decided to leave there and find another firm that sort of was in the middle doing another type of architecture. And what that did is it gave me lots of experience in many different aspects of architecture. It gave me lots of contacts in different places. And it gave me lots of sort of references for when I launched my own firm to go back. And, working in a residential architecture firm sort of gave me that opportunity to understand how clients at that level worked. Working in the very large firm sort of gave me the experience of working in a corporate office where things were very, very different. And then, the mid-sized firm gave me a lot more responsibility that allowed me to sort of grow in that firm as well. So it prepared me very well for when I came out to do what I was doing, and knowing that I didn't miss anything.
How long were you at each of those jobs, roughly?
The first job it was about a year, a little more than a year. The second job was 9 months, and then I stayed at the last job for 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years. I don't remember exactly, but it was the third job. I moved to Westchester. Anne-Marie and I had gotten married at that point, and that was sort of my place where I was going to stay until I was ready to launch my own thing.
I like that. Just thinking that, hear you talking about it, that if I was going to pick as sort of an internship and I'm in my 20s, that I'm gonna work 3 different jobs. If I was gonna just pull a number out of my head. Rather than, because I worked in Boston for 5 years for one firm, which was great. But, looking back, admittedly, I was running projects pretty quickly. It was corporate interiors. So after a few years, I was kind of just doing the same thing, say, for the last 2 years, where I could have taken that 2 years in my 20s and done something completely different. So I think that's a good idea.
And in the third job where I was actually a project manager, I was running $40 million school projects. I was working with one of the principals. They were designing it, and I basically ran those jobs. And so having that experience of knowing how to manage projects was very good when I got into my own firm and started managing large residential projects, because I had that experience of running these, much larger projects. But it's the same process in just smaller scale. How
did you resolve that? Because you touched on this earlier about when you went on your own, your biggest fear was actually having to tell your bosses that you're going to leave. But because you knew that when you were sort of in that firm, so how did you resolve it? That you were able to sort of, I guess, keep it close to your chest. And I guess not feel guilty that I'm going to leave, but how'd that go? Because that's tough.
It was tough, and looking back on it, I made a mistake. I don't know how it would have worked out if I did it a different way, but I think looking back on it, I should have been more transparent with them, and let them know that my plans were to have my own practice someday. I never really did that. I mean, they knew that someday I wanted to, but I don't think they knew how soon.
Right.
And they did. The practice that I was with had 3 partners, and the 2 senior partners were moving on, and so they were looking at the younger leaders in the firm to bring them up and become the new leadership. And there was a few people in the firm that were on that track, and when I told the 2 senior partners, they were very happy for me. One of them told me not to do it. They said, "You'll regret it." The other one, embraced me and said, "Good luck." And then the third one, who was going to be my partner, was pretty upset with me because, he had plans, and I was part of those plans. And I sort of blindsided him, and we're good friends today, but at the time, I needed to do what I needed to do, but I think I probably could have given him a little bit more notice. I mean, I gave him a lot of, technically notice. I gave them, months of my time before I actually left. So there was a major transition before I left. But I think that if he knew that there wasn't really a possibility that I was going to stay, he may have, made different plans for himself. But in my mind, there was probably always that option that I would stay there, because I was very happy there and I liked doing what I was doing. I think the two things that really had me leave was, one was that it was that time I needed to make that decision, because I didn't want to really have him commit to me, because we hadn't gotten to that point yet where I was actually on the track. It was sort of, this was the understanding that this is where I was headed. I was still too young to be in that position, but that's where I was headed. And so I did have to leave before that happened. I didn't want to commit to that and then leave. And so that's
a tough one, because let's say, for example, if you were, because you obviously gave them a long enough notice, like you said, months. So there was a month's transition, which is the most really anybody could ask for. But had you sort of been more transparent up front, maybe you wouldn't have got the opportunities that you have there, because they would have just passed over you. So it's tricky as especially as young architects in our 20s trying to figure out, how much do we share with our boss? Yeah,
it's not easy. I don't think you can do that up front, because nobody's going to hire you knowing that you're not going to stay there.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's probably something that you need to sort of slowly let people know, if it is your plan. Today I look back and I put myself in his position, and I would have been upset too. But I don't know if there was a better way of doing it. Like you said, I don't know if I told him that I would have, had the opportunities that I would have had there.
Well, I think employers are smart enough that they know when they have young, good architects working for them, they obviously want to keep them. But I think there's definitely a part of them that know, hey, this person's got initiative. Hey, this person is really good. I could lose this person at any time. So I think they sort of know that, and they might fear that a little bit, because obviously they're putting a lot of time into you and training you. But in the same token, you're giving them a lot back in the work you're doing. So it's still a win-win.
Yeah. I think, now from the leadership point of view, I think it probably would be beneficial for the leaders for those people that you're looking at grooming to become leaders in your firm, you should start that dialogue. You should, talk to them about what their futures may be with the firm, and sort of, ask them that question on whether, is your plan to stay, or is your plan to start your own firm? And if starting your own firm is the plan, then embrace that too, and teach them what they need to know to do that, so they can be a successful architect as well.
Well, I think what would be cool about that, and I'm with the employer hat on now, if let's say in your situation it's a big multi-million-dollar school project, and I got somebody young such as you who comes to me and says, we have a dialogue that, okay, it's clear that you want to go out on your own. Obviously not today, but at some point you do. So part of me would be like, okay, they're a go-getter. They're going to take this job seriously. I mean, they are focused. So yeah, that's the kind of person I want running this job. And I'm going to just understand that they're not going to be here forever, but I'm going to help them and they're going to help me. They're going to just run a great job. I might not have them for the next one, but at least I got them for this one, kind of thing.
And I think also if you sort of groom them for their own business, then you're helping the profession become a stronger profession. And you'll also gain a lot of respect. So, I think a lot of architects fear that you're going to teach these people what they need to know, and then they're going to become competitors. But if you build that respect and that rapport with them, maybe they won't be direct competitors. Maybe intentionally, because they don't want to break the relationship that you've built. That maybe they'll start their own firm, but they'll start it in a different market where they're not being direct competitors, because you've built that respect.
Yeah, and I think that also brings up the issue of, do you operate from a place of scarcity or a place of abundance, which is really another whole topic. But it's important because if you operate from a space of abundance, there's enough work for all of us, and it's karma too. I mean, it comes around too. So, all right, well, let's. I know you got to go here, but I want to talk about. What are for the business-minded architect? Just the most important, say, 5 basic concepts that an architect should be familiar with, who's thinking about going on their own, or maybe they have their own business that's all over the place in terms of is it a profit and loss statement? I mean, what are the 5 sort of key things?
Yeah, I would again, and I don't mean to keep plugging the website, but I would that resource guide that has the 12 steps really are the 12 things you need to know. And I think of those 12, the 5 most important things, and I can kind of group them up. The first one is personal productivity. My biggest challenge as an architect is knowing and learning how to be organized. And now that I'm in this virtual firm where I'm running my own thing in my own place and people are elsewhere doing their own thing, that's even more critical to be organized and to have those systems in place. So that's number 1. Number 2, I would say create a life plan so you know what you want to do long term, and that life plan should include your business plan. A business plan is very, very important. Even if it evolves, and it will evolve, it'll change over time, but it'll give you a framework for which to grow your business on. To just do what we did, where we just blindly jump, you may succeed, but it'll take a long time to get there because you'll just keep hitting these walls and then bouncing off and going some other direction, bouncing off and going another direction. If you have a plan, you can at least have these goals set and these action points where you can kind of get to where you want to go. And your plans will change as you grow. I just wrote a post on this. As you grow, your priorities will shift and things that were important are no longer important. And so that flexibility will actually give you the freedom to write that plan and not be afraid to write it because it will change, but it'll give you some sort of framework. The third one I would say is sales and marketing. Architects traditionally have been terrible at this. Marketing, some of us are very good at that. I was very good at marketing. The whole county knew who we were. Sales, I had no idea that I was missing sales. I didn't even know that sales were important. I figured if I got the word out there that 5CAT existed and showed them the work that we did and worked really hard at getting our name out there, getting articles about us in newspaper, we were all over the place. And I was meeting clients. All the inquiries were coming in, and I was sending out proposals, and I wasn't getting the jobs. And the piece that was missing was the sales system, which is literally just creating a process of how you get the job. The first step is to follow up and call them and ask them for the job. I was missing all that. I was just sending out proposals and waiting for them to send me a check. And so creating a sales process and a sales system, which I think a lot of architects look at that as sort of the used car salesman type of business, but that's not. It's just a matter of knowing how to get to convert those proposals and all that time involved in creating proposals to actually convert them into jobs. So that's sales and marketing. I think the fourth one is financial management, which is what you were referring to, P&L statements and balance sheets and profit plans. Just know the basics of what those documents are and how they work, and how money flows in and out of a business. Just understand the absolute basics of how that works. And then the fifth one is customer service. I look at architecture as we're running a service business. We don't create a product, we create a service, and we manage an experience. That's how I look at architecture. The architecture itself is sort of the end product, but the service that people are hiring 5CAT for is the experience to get through that process and ultimately end up with a piece of architecture that they live in. And so the systems that are put in place and the skills that you learn to manage the process, the experience of architecture. Those are the things that are important from a business point of view. That customer service is a very high priority, that we don't just get a job, design some fantastic architecture, hand it over to a general contractor and walk away. That's not what a successful architect does. There's a whole process that's being managed from a business point of view, because your happy clients today are the ones that are going to refer you to your next job. And the better you do your job from a customer service point of view, the less you're going to have to do from a marketing sales point of view. Other people will do that for you if you get good at it.
Exactly. Great 5 tips. And customer service, yes. And especially if we're going into the residential world, customer service, I mean, it's in some respects, it could be the bulk of sort of what we do, because you're right, because that leads to future work, but just dealing with people, and probably listening is the most important thing, but just dealing with the different personalities and the husband who wants one thing and the wife who wants another. And I mean, it's a very sort of complex managing relationship situation, and a lot of it only comes through experience, really. But it's fascinating nonetheless.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the most interesting part of what we do for me.
Yeah, I would say if you're thinking you want to get into residential but you don't like people, then probably residential is not the thing to get into.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Eric, do you have anything else waking you up over there? Do you have anything else you want to ask our guest?
No. This has been great. But one thing I would like to mention is that I think that there's this constant fight with young architects between their ego, what their perception of the office is, and then reality. And one takeaway I'd like them to get, because they heard from all 3 of us that, we had the big office and nobody used it, and we invested in all this nonsense and we didn't use it. And then when we came to our senses, we scaled down. It's kind of a nice theme of the episode.
I think when you get to be around 40, you come to your senses a little bit. Would you guys agree with that?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. The big tip is to grow slow.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you know what? That just reminded me, instant success. Because when we're young, we're 29, we're 30, we get like a big job and we think like, this is it, my career is set. But that's only one job. So don't go rent the big office. Don't go, spending all your money. Don't be NFL players and just blow all your money, because you need work after that. It's just one job. So, because it's likely, if you're in your late 20s, early 30s, it's likely you might get a really cool job, but then nothing after that, because people might like you, you just might be at the right time, at the right place, and just get a really cool job, and you think your future is set, and it's just that one job. It's like the commercial actor who hits a national commercial, and then they don't get another one for another 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it's all part of the plan. You need to plan for that and plan for the downtimes, because these recessions that we are going through, it's all cyclical. We'll have a few years of really good times coming up, and then we're going to hit another recession, because that's the way our economy works. They go up and down. And so if you can build a business that is sustainable, stay debt-free, which I promote, that you should not go into debt.
Yes.
Personally or business. If you can't afford it, don't do it. And grow a business that can fund itself and grow organically. And when you hit those recessions, you'll have enough money saved up, both personally and in the business, to ride that recession through and survive to get to the other side. I'm
glad you just mentioned that, because I'm a huge proponent of debt-free. And, I would say if you're a young architect and, I don't know, you got even $10,000 on your credit card, whatever it is, don't even think about opening your office till you get that paid off. Keep doing your day job, just get it paid off. Because what that's going to do, it's also going to take a lot of the stress off. I mean, like you mentioned, Mark, you were young when you opened your office. We didn't have a lot of stress then. We didn't have so it makes it easier. But if we're opening an office and we're already in the red, it's just not going to get better from there.
Yeah, and we made that mistake, and we're still paying for it.
for getting that 2,000 square foot office.
We growing a firm and holding on to employees longer than we really should have from a business point of view. We held on to them because we were loyal to them and they were loyal to us. But from a business point of view, that was a mistake. We went into debt to keep those people on, and then those people moved on, and as they should. It was a time for them to move on, and it helped us when they did move on. But we went into pretty significant debt trying to keep those people paid, and the rents paid and the expenses that came through every month, where we should have made decisions much earlier on in the recession, and tried to stay debt free through. And so we're paying that off now, and our goal is to become debt free and not go back into debt ever again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is in any profession, in any life. I mean, just debt is not. I mean, debt will kill you, literally. Yeah. All right, cool. And Eric, thank you for joining us, and Mark, thank you for joining us. This has been fantastic, and I look forward to chatting with you again. So, on behalf of everybody here.
Thanks for listening to the ARE Podcast. Be sure to visit architectexamprep.com and check out our other podcast episodes, video tips, and the ARE blog. Remember to plan, practice, and pass.